If your relationship has finally gotten quiet, if the fighting has stopped, if things feel calm for the first time in months, I need you to hear this. You might not be healing, you might be dying, and nobody is going to tell you the difference. Look, I know what you're thinking. Finally, we are not screaming at each other anymore. Things are getting better now. But what if I told you that silence isn't always safety? What if the quiet you're feeling isn't peace? It's resignation. And by the end of this video, you will know how to tell the difference between a relationship that's genuinely healing and one that's quietly bleeding out. Because here's what most people don't realize. Sometimes the most dangerous phase of a relationship is when it finally gets quiet. So what actually happened? Let me tell you about Priya and Rahul. They had been married 8 years. And for the first 6 years, they fought constantly. Money, in-laws, parenting, the same arguments on repeat. But then about 2 years ago, something shifted. The fighting stopped. Priya told me that it's like we finally grew up. We don't argue anymore. We are peaceful now. But when I looked at Rahul, he looked empty. So I asked him, when did the fighting stop? He thought about it. And he said about 2 years ago, maybe a little more. So I asked, what happened 2 years ago? And there was this long pause. And then he said something that made Priya's face go pale. He said, I stopped caring enough to fight. See, what Priya interpreted as maturity, what she celebrated as finally being peaceful, was actually Rahul emotionally checking out. The silence wasn't resolution, it was resignation. And she had no idea. And here it is what actually happened. 2 years ago, Rahul tried to have a conversation about something that mattered to him. Priya dismissed it. Not maliciously, obviously. She was stressed. She didn't realize it was important to him. But Rahul walked away from that conversation and made a decision, not consciously, but deep in his nervous system, that fighting doesn't change anything, so I'll stop fighting. And from that day forward, he became agreeable, compliant, quiet. Priya thought that they had turned a corner. Rahul had just stopped expecting her to understand him. So that's not peace, that's surrender. And most couples celebrate surrender as if it's growth. And here's the thing about silence in a relationship. It can mean two completely different things, different ideas. Silence type 1, secure silence. This is when two people are so comfortable with each other, they don't need to fill every moment with words. They can sit together, read, exist in the same space and feel connected. The silence feels so full. There is no tension, no unspoken resentment, just presence. And then comes silence type 2, shutdown silence. This is when two people have stopped talking because talking doesn't work anymore. This silence feels empty, heavy. Like there is a wall between you that nobody is willing to name. And most people can't tell the difference. So they mistake the shutdown for peace. And by the time they realize what's actually happening, years passed. What this looks like in real life. And here's how you know if your silence is peace or shutdown. So pattern number 1, you have stopped bringing things up. And not because you resolve them, but because you learn that bringing them up doesn't lead anywhere productive. So you just stop. You tell yourself it's not worth the fight. But what you're really saying is they are not going to hear me anyway. I had a client, let's call her Zainab. She told me that we never fight about money anymore. And I said, did you figure out a budget you both agree on? She said, no. So how did you stop fighting? Long pause. She said, I stopped asking him to change his spending. Why? Because every time I brought it up, he would get defensive. So I just gave up. Now that's not resolution, that's exhaustion. Pattern number 2, conversations stay on surface level. You talk about logistics, who's picking up the kids, what's for the dinner, and when the bills are due, but you don't talk about feelings, dreams, fears, the things that actually matter. And when someone asks, how are you doing? Or how are you two doing? You say, we're fine. Because technically you are not fighting. but you are also not connecting. You have become efficient roommates, co-managers of a household, but you are not partners anymore. So again, there is another pattern. The pattern number 3. You feel relief when they leave. This one is brutal, by the way, and it's true. When your partner goes out to work to see his or her friends, whatever, you feel lighter. Not because you hate them, but because their absence is easier than their presence. Because they are gone, you don't have to manage the tension. You don't have to pretend everything is fine. You can just breathe. If that's your reality, you're not in a peaceful relationship. You are in an exhausting one that's gone quiet. I had another couple, Amit and Kavya. Yeah, Kavya. Kavya told me, we are doing so much better. We barely argue anymore. And I asked Amit, how do you feel when Kavya is at work? He hesitated first and he quietly said, relieved. Kavya looked devastated. You feel relieved when I'm gone? I'm sorry, I don't know how else to say it, but when you're home, I'm constantly worried I'm going to say the wrong thing. So when you are gone, I can relax. That's what Amit said. So that's not peace. That's walking on eggshells and calling it calm. Pattern number 4. You have rewritten the narrative. You tell yourself stories to justify the silence. That we are just both introverts. We have always been independent, and some couples just don't need to talk as much. You say this to yourself, but deep down you know something is off. You remember a time when you couldn't wait to tell them things. When you had come home excited to share your day, when silence between you felt comfortable, not uncomfortable, and now you're telling yourself that this new version, that's quiet, distant version, is just how we are now. But it's not. It's how you have become. That's the difference. So why this happens psychologically? Why does this happen? Why do people mistake shutdown for peace? Because your nervous system is trying to protect you. Here it is how it works. Every time you try to connect and got rejected, every time you bring something up and get dismissed, every time you reach out and get turned away, your nervous system registers this is not safe. And after enough repetitions, it stops sending you the signal to try. It's the same mechanism that keeps you from touching a hot stove twice. Your body learns, that hurts, don't do it again. So you stop. Not consciously, your nervous system just stops generating the impulse to reach out. And here's the tricky part. This feels relief. It feels like relief because conflict is painful, rejection is painful, being dismissed is painful. So when your nervous system stops pushing you to engage, it feels better. You think, oh, good, I'm finally over, I'm not bothered anymore, but you're not over it. You have just gone numb. And there's a term for this in psychology. It's called learned helplessness. It's when you have tried so many times to change something, you failed so many times, then you stop trying altogether. Not because the problem went away, but because you have learned that trying doesn't work. So you enter what I call peaceful despair. Peaceful because you are not fighting. Despair because you have given up hope that things will ever be different. And the dangerous part, it looks like maturity from the outside. Your family sees you're not fighting and think that, God, good, they have finally figured it out. Your friends think they are so stable now. Even you think we are doing better, but internally, you're dying a slow death. And nobody, including you, realizes that it's happening. The lie that keeps you trapped, the ghost belief at this stage is, if we are not fighting, we are fine. And this is one of the most dangerous lies in relationship because it assumes that the absence of conflict equals the presence of connection. It doesn't. You can have zero conflict and zero intimacy. You can have a quiet house and a dead marriage. And let me tell you something I learned from my own culture. In many South Asian families, marriages are built on duty, not passion. And you know what people say about those marriages? They never fight. They're so stable, and you look closer and you see two people who have learned to coexist without ever truly seeing each other. They are polite, functional, peaceful, and completely disconnected. That's not a model to aspire to, by the way. That's a warning. Because here's the thing, healthy relationships aren't silent, they are full. They're full of conversations, full of laughter, full of disagreements that leads to understanding, and again, full of repair. Silence in a healthy relationship is comfortable because it's optional. You could talk if you wanted to. You just don't need to in this moment. But silence in a dying relationship is mandatory. You don't talk because talking feels dangerous, because it might expose how disconnected you really are. So you keep the silence and you tell yourself it's peace. It's not. It's a ceasefire. And a ceasefire isn't the same as peace, by the way. A ceasefire is when both sides are too exhausted to keep fighting. So they just stop. But the war isn't over. It just paused. And eventually, one of two things will happen. Either someone finally says, I can't do this anymore, and leaves. Or you both just say that, stay in silence, stay in the distance, stay in the quiet desperation of a marriage, but that's technically intact, but emotionally dead. And you call it making it work. What actually matters now? So what do you do if you recognize yourself in this? What do you do if you realize the peace you have been celebrating is actually a shutdown? And here what matters now. 1. Name it. You have to be willing to say out loud, this isn't peace, this is avoidance. And you have to say it to your partner. Not in a, I would say, in a different way, in a loud way, but in a vulnerable way. I have been thinking, for example, we are not fighting anymore, but I don't think we are really connecting either. And I'm scared that we have just gotten good at avoiding each other. That's a terrifying thing to say, I understand, because it breaks the illusion. And sometimes the illusion is all you have left. And you can't heal what you want to name. Number 2, identify one thing you have stopped bringing up. Think about it. What's the thing you used to talk about that you have just given up on? Maybe it's sex, maybe it's affection, maybe it's how you spend time together. Maybe it's something that your partner does that bothers you, but you have decided it's not worth the fight. Identify one thing and bring it up. Not to start a fight, but to test, is there still life here? Say something like, I need to talk to you about something I have been avoiding, and I stopped bringing it up because I don't think it would change anything. But I realize that by staying silent, I'm slowly disconnecting from you, and I don't want that. If your partner really hears you, and engages, there is hope. If they dismiss you, get defensive, or shut down, you have your answer. Number 3, reintroduce small conflicts. I know this sounds insane, but healthy relationships have conflicts. Not drama, not screaming, but disagreements, difference of opinion, friction that leads to understanding. If you have been avoiding all conflict to keep the peace, you need to reintroduce this. Start small. For example, actually, I don't want to watch that show tonight, so can we watch something else? Say that. I know you think it's fine, but I'm not okay with how your mother spoke to me yesterday. I need you to help me with the dishes. I have been doing them all alone for weeks and I'm tired. So these are small, but they are important because they test, can we still have a friction and stay connected? Or have we only learned how to coexist by avoiding each other and everything real? So if your partner can handle small conflicts without shutting down or exploding, you can work with that. If they can't, you're in trouble. Number 4, set a deadline. This is the hardest one, by the way. But if you try to reconnect, really try, and nothing changes after 3 to 6 months, you have to be willing to make a decision. And that not out of anger, not out of impulse, but out of clarity. Because living in peaceful disconnection for years will destroy you. It will make you forget what real intimacy feels like. It will make you doubt whether connection is even possible. And one day you will wake up at 50, 60 or 70 years old and realize you spent your entire life in a quiet marriage and you really never lived. So I'm not saying every quiet relationship is dying. Sometimes couples genuinely find peace after years of conflict. They learn to communicate better, they grow together, they earn their silence. But if you are watching this and something in your chest tightened, if you recognized yourself in these patterns, then your silence isn't peace. It's a warning, and you need to listen to it. Because the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And the indifference is quiet, it's polite, it's fine, but it's not alive. So if you want a marriage that's alive, not just intact, you need to be willing to disturb the silence, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's scary. Because peace that requires you to stay small isn't peace. It's just a quieter kind of pain. If this video felt personal, it's because it touched your pattern, not a personality. Clarity doesn't tell you what to do. It helps you stop lying to yourself. Next case is already waiting for you. I'll see you there.